Okay, video's recording. Are you ready?
Ready whenever you are.
All right, here we go.
And now for something special. The unit is self-contained with its own saddler, farrier, wheelwright and so on. It's a rigorous training dished out who know all there is to know about horses, and it brings results.
We take you behind the scenes now to show just some of the interesting aspects of this training.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine, the best podcast to create sounder horses from the ground up. Mike Stine is a registered journeyman farrier with an APF-1 accreditation and was also the official farrier for the 2018 World Equestrian Games and 2017 American Eventing Championship. In this episode, we're going to get into a lot of the equine biomechanics. Without further ado, over to my far right side is Mike Stine. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Travis?
Doing well. Before we continue, before we start, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming back. The first couple podcasts that we do, we had huge results and huge, I guess, fan base based on just you alone, and we appreciate you guys and hopefully continue to follow us during this adventure as we do Equine Dynamics. And one more thing I'd like to say, Mike, happy belated birthday.
Well, thank you. I was trying to forget that.
So did you do anything special for your birthday or anything?
Believe it or not, I went out and worked on horses. That's always pretty special.
Did you really?
Yes, I did.
Well, good for you. And did you have a birthday cake or anything like that? Do you have a special food or anything for your birthday that you always have to have for your birthday?
I like food, yes. You know.
It doesn't matter as long as it's edible. Well, as I was talking, we were talking about everyone that's listening to us. Mike doesn't know these stats, so watch the expression on his face. Now, don't forget, for every podcast we do, we also have a matching video as well. And the way you see that is go over to YouTube, search Equine Dynamics, and you can find the YouTube channel for every podcast we do. You can see us right here in the studio. I'm waving to Mike. Mike's waving to me. We'll also incorporate any pictures that you guys send us. And the way you get those to us is go to equinedynamics.com. Send your questions to Mike Stine. He'll answer anything that has to deal with horses from the ground up. He's pretty knowledgeable in that. And if you have any questions or pictures or anything like that, just go over to equinedynamics.com. And in the subject line, just put podcast so we know that it comes directly to Mike. He's got a bunch of people working in his office. And, you know, we want to make sure your questions and pictures get to Mike Stine as well, and you can see it on the video as we go on in time. Now, Mike, the top 5 countries that have downloaded this podcast. I like to do this with a new podcast just to let people know, hey, am I the only one out there listening to this podcast? The top 5 countries that have downloaded just the last couple episodes of Equine Dynamics, right? Number 1, of course, the United States. Number 2, France. Number 3, Belgium. Number 4, United Kingdom, and rounding up the top 5 as far as people downloading us is the Russian Federation. Are you familiar with those guys?
A little bit, yeah. I've heard of them once or twice.
So just to give you the magnitude of the subject line and the subject that we get into here on Equine Dynamics. Now, the top states here in the United States: North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, California. Actually, we had some downloads out there in California, District of Columbia, Iowa, Ohio, Georgia as well. So pretty impressive, not bad. Off to a very, very good start, as I would think as well. What do you think about that, Mike?
Wow.
Man of so many words. All right, guys, stick around. We're going to take a small little break and dive into the show, and we'll get this started for you. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Stick around. He'll be right back. There you go. Wow.
I guess so.
All right. Here we go. Coming back. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Actually, I'm going to stop and do that again. Welcome back to Equine with... Give me a minute. I told you I didn't have my coffee this morning. You're a cup ahead of me.
Or 2, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine, the best podcast to create sounder horses from the ground up. Mike Stine, we're going to get into what is biomechanics, equine biomechanics, and your journey from the first, from looking at the hoof and learning and watching the whole entire horse together. Give me step by step what you do if you have a brand new horse and you're the first one. I say the first one on the scene, but this is your first time dealing with this horse.
The first time dealing with the horse, first one on scene, first you better take a look at the horse.
Okay.
And, you know, over the years working with a number of people that were way ahead of where I was and helped bring me along, just learning to pay attention to what's going on, the body of the horse. Because we start off looking at feet.
All right. So, but what actually is the biomechanics? What does that term mean when you're talking about equines?
The movement, the horses have to move. Learning to pay attention to how they're moving. You know, where are you losing energy? What is good good energy? How are they using themselves? Is it mechanically correct to maximize performance and longevity of the horse? And what can we do to work with my job to help them along with that? Because, you know, the mechanic of what's going on with the ground directly affects movement patterns, muscling, performance, long-term soundness of the horse.
So when you focus on the hoof of the horse and you're learning how to watch the whole entire horse, is it you're just kind of tweaking the shoe as it goes on?
Yes, we're looking at positioning under the bone column because, you know, when we start shooting radiographs, we start positioning around the joint of the hoof when we're building or doing whatever we're doing with the foot, whether it be shoeing or trimming. You know, we want to get the foot in the right location under the bone column. If it's not working right with the bone column, it affects all the way up the horse. If you got, you know, long toe, low heel, foot shooting out in front of it, it changes pressure all the way up into the shoulder. And you'll see that in the muscling of the horse up top. And that's why you need to start learning to pay attention to what's going on in the body of the horse, the muscle structure and the way the horse is developed, where they're carrying tension, where they're developed, where you've got atrophy in the muscles. It tells you so much before you ever even see a horse move.
So this is after you've taken the pictures or the x-rays before you even, I mean, do you recommend doing the pictures and x-rays like we were talking about on last week's show? Do you recommend doing that first? Like when you go out, brand new horse, brand new customer, and the first thing out of your mouth is, do we take the horse to have x-rays done first? Or do you just go, okay, let me see how the horse is standing, how it's, you know, moving. Can you walk the horse this way? Can you walk the horse that way? And then from there, because of your expertise, you can go, okay, I can see he needs, you know, X amount of degrees on this and X amount of degrees on that.
Well, normally we'll take a look at the horse.
Okay.
I'm communicating with my trainers.
Mm-hmm.
Good trainers are going to give me good information of what they're feeling or seeing. Also, I'm going to take a look at the horse. And truthfully, when they're bringing a horse into the barn, you hear them. And are they landing square? Are they, you know, are they slapping? Are they sliding a foot? What's going on? There was a situation, a barn that I worked in had a double aisleway, and the gal that was the trainer there I've worked with for a long time, and somebody brought a horse in the barn. I said something to her. She just looks up and says, "That's not your horse." And I was like, he's not moving even. He's landing hard on one side.
So this is another customer's horse, and you could hear it out of your trained hearing as far as how the horse is walking. You're like going, there's something wrong with that horse. And the person basically said, well, don't worry about that horse. You're not working on that horse.
That's wasn't my horse.
Right.
But all I knew is there was a horse coming up the aisleway on the other side, and I could hear it as soon as it hit the concrete. It's like, well, that doesn't sound quite right. And, you know, if you gone to look at that horse and you started looking at the muscling, the shoulder set, the hips, how he was carrying himself, is he going in a straight line? Is his body curved? Whatever it may be, you would have found something not dead even on the horse, because you could hear it as hoofbeat. And I tell you, I had a friend of mine that got to know, we met at Equine, we were both speakers there, and he was totally blind. And he cued me in on that more than anybody, and he was a massage therapist. I'd worked with a lot of farriers, but he really helped me majorly as far as putting the package together, and probably taught me more about shoeing a horse than an awful lot of the farriers I'd worked with.
because yeah, I mean, when you have that fifth sense that you're missing one sense, and then everything else is more acute to what's going on around you. So he taught you how to listen more than actual visualize what's going on. Now, when you go out to a place for the first time outside of taking it to get X-rays and stuff, do you recommend having the trainer there, or the trainer and the owner, or the rider? I guess I guess that's what I'm going. Do you need that? You would recommend having the trainer there
if they have a trainer that is a good trainer. Yes, I would. I want direct communication with the trainer for sure. The trainer that your wife works with. I talk to Brett on a regular basis about horses, and if there's something odd going on, he will let me. He sees in the training program horses is not working where he wants it to. Hey, check this out for me. This one he's not tracking straight. He's not getting as much drive off the back end as he should be. Can you help me out here? So I need that input, and also just directly look at the horse. Ray was the blind man was also a massage therapist and a saddle fitter, and he had me massaging horses and taught me an awful lot of what I know about the muscle structure. The large majority of what I know about the muscle structure of a horse came through the years working with Ray on horses, because he was teaching massage, and at a point he had so many people, I was helping him. So, the learning to pay attention to what's going on in the body of the horse, that's where I get most of my information.
So we're going to take a short little break here, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about one of the most common issues that Mike sees in horses, and we'll get into that in great detail. Stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics right here. We'll be right back. Would you rather look at this screen, or would you rather look at this screen?
Doesn't really matter that much.
Well, only because I don't want anything to distract you, I guess, is what I'm saying. Well,
let's put the other screen.
You like the other screen? I know, because I saw you kind of looking at yourself, and you were kind of moving and trying to make sure that you're in the right angle and stuff. So I did. Sometimes you looking at yourself, you're always questioning what I look like. Am I doing something right? Yeah. So. Oh.
Yes.
Okay. You okay? You're comfortable over there?
I am good.
Okay. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Don't forget, he is a registered journeyman farrier with an APF-1 accreditation, and was also the 2018 official farrier for the World Equestrian Games. That is Mike Stine. Over to my far end. Stine recently had a birthday. You look good, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I had a birthday too, but I don't look as good as you do.
You're good at lying.
And don't forget, if you want to send any questions to, thanks, Mike. You want to send any questions to Mike Stine, go to equinedynamics.com, send him your question. In the subject line, please put podcast in there, so the email goes directly to him, and it's not a bill collector, and he doesn't want to do any of that stuff. And also, for every podcast we do, we also have a matching video. In time, we're going to have things here in the studio so you can see. I'm sure Mike will bring in a shoe and a horse, and he's got a whole huge skeleton. You got a whole full-size horse skeleton sitting at your place. How creepy is that? I bet you're a hit on Halloween.
Well, definitely have skeletons in my closet.
So maybe we can get Mike bring in a couple of his feet and stuff, and show you actually on the cameras here in the studio of what he's actually dealing and what he's looking for. Give you one more aspect of the podcast, and that is to search for him at Equine Dynamics on YouTube as well. Now, what's one of the most common things you see in the biomechanics of a horse? And what is high-low horses? What does that mean?
Well, I think what we were referring to is mismatched front feet, high angle, low angle.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're working on horses, none of them match up exactly. None of them. In an ideal world, we would love for the feet to match perfectly. But, when you're getting shoes, your shoes don't fit the same on each foot, unless you're, so what we're doing is building custom for that foot, or that, actually it's more the bone column than the foot.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've got mismatched feet, if you start looking up the horse and you start looking into your shoulder of the horse, you will see it there on the front end. Also in the back end, it will show up. But with the scapulas not being set exactly the same, it jumps out at you, and the shoulder is pretty big. And, what I've got to do is work on getting a situation where I can try to get the shoulders moving as evenly as possible. If the shoulders are not working correctly, the back end cannot come through. There again, if I have not got the back end working where it should be, he can't get off his shoulders because he throws his weight onto the front end. And then we get into the whole ball of wax with that saddle you were talking about.
Yeah.
So proudly paid so much money for.
Right.
Because if your tack does not allow your horse to come into the correct position to move, he can't move. And that will affect what's going on the ground. If you're compressing his back down, and if I got a horse that is crushing heels, I can do everything in the world to try to get ahead of that situation. But if you constantly creating that kind of a downforce and locking his shoulders up, he will continue to try to crush his heels. So you have to start piecing together the puzzle of what's going on. And
I don't want, I hate to put a time frame on it, but I mean, usually from the time you get started, when do you start seeing results of adjusting the shoes? And I'm sure you probably see it, of course, day one, but to get everything back, is normally a 6-week thing? I say a 6-week thing, or a 6 shoeing appointments, or is it, it's always care over and over, but.
Well, that's one of those things that I don't know that I could figure out how to put a time window on, because you're always adjusting. You're always taking a look. If you're not, you probably shouldn't be shoeing horses. But there's always you get into a window where the horses are pretty comfortable, and you work around that general pattern. And things will come up where we have to make a change because of something. And that's one of those deals where during the letdown periods on some of these competition horses, if we're going to make big changes, we need to do it during the letdown period. Because, when they're in hard training, if you change something on how the horse moves a little bit, they're going to get muscle sore. And if they get muscle sore, they're going to try to suck back to where they were. And so that's kind of counterproductive.
And they'll forget everything they basically learned prior to the letdown session.
Right. And, when you start working with movement patterns of a horse, it takes a while. Muscles start adjusting, then tendons and ligaments start adjusting. You can build muscle faster than you can build tendon strength.
So when I say the term high-low horses, what am I actually saying? Of course, I'm not a horse guy. Most of you could probably tell by now. I'm the radio guy. This is what I do for a career. But my wife, she is a horse person. She's been riding horses since the age of 6. Since she could walk, she could get on a horse. She's been riding, not professionally, but she has competed in competitions. She does it for a hobby. She does it for a stress relief, which I'm sure many of you out there do. So I don't know. So the questions I ask is from the common man. I'm the common guy who just asks these silly questions. So when I say high-low horses, what is that actually telling? What am I actually saying?
Well, I'll tell you that the high-low problem with horses, if you take x-rays and you measure the angulation of the coffin bone themselves, sometimes they don't match. In fact, they probably are a degree or so off on any of them. Some there's a bigger difference between one and the other. If that's the case, the feet aren't going to match. Deer in the younger years of life, babies, because of their neck being short, they will graze 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. If they get stuck into one pattern, well, the way the tendons and ligaments in the leg develop differently. And your tendons may be shorter, or your check ligaments may be tighter on the one side where they pull, sit the leg back, and you end up with a much more upright angle. That goes into high-low. Some of what we were talking about working with babies and dealing with some of the misalignments. And as far as the big differences in alignments, you really, in the first 3 months of age, is where you can have the biggest effect on something like that. The problem is there are a lot of horses that we don't get to touch during that time because, well, it's a baby. We want to see whatever
where it's going to go and stuff.
Then would they come up older, they become competition horses, they come off the racetrack, and it's, okay, we've got this horse, he doesn't match evenly on both sides. Well, I need to get that stride arc as close to as I can from left to right, as even as I can, to get the horse to go in a straight line, because if not, they dog track. and they're, you know, they end up driving off with one hind leg.
So when you say it's basically you could have, is it in inches or is it in angles? The difference between like the right side of the horse, I say the driver's side of the horse, and the passenger side of the horse. You know, if you're sitting on the horse, that's the only way I can describe it. So
Onside and offside.
Okay, inside and offside.
Well, on side you get on the, yeah, and the other side. Anyway.
But I mean, what's acceptable? And of course, you want everything to be perfect. But what is acceptable, and what's a measurement that would be, hey, we really need to adjust this now?
Well, you know, when you get to a matured horse, there's only so much we can do with that. I can play with the breakover point on the shoe. I can play with a number of things in what I do to help get the body where it works. And it's really about getting the shoulders to work together as evenly as possible. You probably are on some of these extreme feet, you are not going to get the feet to match if that's what you're going for. And in fact, on some of these horses that are there's a good bit of difference, to try to match the feet, you will end up probably making them worse. But you've got to learn to work each side as an individual. But you know, needs to be a certain relationship. And honestly, the biggest relationship I need to worry about is not left to right on your front feet. It's more the diagonals, because I'm working on walk, trot, canter horses. So when they're trotting, the diagonals work as a matched pair.
Now, why don't you work on 100 jumpers? You said well, during one of the breaks, or actually before we started the show, you were talking about 100 jumpers. You're like, well, I don't work with those horses, and I was like, well, why not? And then we started talking about the shoe pulling thing. But why don't you work with 100 jumpers? As to, you know, you would think a farrier would work on all horses, but you specialize in the walk, trot, canter.
Well, I'm not a gaited horse shoer. I don't do racking horses. I don't do walking horses. The hunter horses are horses with walk, trot, canter horses as far as the gait. Now, as far as the competitive horses I work on, they are primarily 3-day event horses and dressage horses. I do a few jumpers. Now, there's a difference between a jumper and a hunter.
What's the difference?
Well, the jumpers are time and rails, and the hunters, they do form, count strides in between rails. And I've been away from the hunter thing for a long time, so I'm not up on everything that they are doing in the hunter world.
Now, is it easy to take a hunter jumper horse, and this is from a rider standpoint, take a hunter jumper horse and transition into a dressage horse?
Not necessarily. You got to have the right horse for the right job.
Really?
And the dressage horse, the way they work in the back end when they're doing dressage is totally different than what a horse needs to set up for a jump. So some of us, how do they track in the back end? Do they track narrow? Do they track wide? And because horses will tend to, if they track wide in the back end, they'll track narrow in the front. If they track narrow in the back end, they'll track wider in the front. They're kind of like a tricycle, either going forward or backwards. But, certain combinations work better for certain sports. And just as certain breeds are better for the dressage arena, certain breeds tend to be better for jumpers. And, it's like a trainer I work for said, you can't go against the basic nature of a horse, but so much. You can't make every horse into a dressage horse. You can't make every horse into a top jumper. It's
like you can't make a defensive tackle a power forward in basketball.
You can try if you need him to knock people down. I mean, this is what kind of game you want to play.
Right, exactly. All right, guys, stick around. We'll take one short little break and come right back with Mike Stine. You'll listen to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. He'll be right back. You okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In the hunter jumper world, they have hunter jumper shows.
Right.
You have jumper classes, you have hunter classes. Hunters go over fence. Most people say, well, if they go over fence, they're a hunter jumper. Well, there's hunter over fence. Jumpers are time and rails. So it's in the Olympics, they have jumpers. They don't have hunters.
Well, I know that when she had another horse called Widget, and she would go, I would sit there and I'd watch her and she'd go 1, 2, 3, and then over 1, 2, and then change the lead to get to the other one. I know that, so I don't know
that would be hunter.
Yeah, so that's what she did.
Right. Jumper, they can come in if it's 3 strides for him to be comfortable, if it's 5 strides for him to be comfortable, it doesn't matter. And he could come in pumped up, blowed up, and snorting fire. You know?
All right, we'll come back. I want to talk about the Tokyo thing real quick, and then we'll get into the last, the common issues for white line, fungus, and abscess.
Okay, let's just do white line this time.
Okay,
because we can do the whole segment on white line.
Okay,
and then make abscess into another segment.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Don't forget, if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask Mike Stine, go to equinedynamics.com. He's got a little email there. Make sure in the subject line you put podcast so it comes directly to him and to his email box. And don't forget, for every podcast we do, we have a matching video as well. If you'd like to see our ugly faces here in the studio, go to Equine Dynamics in the YouTube channel, and make sure you subscribe to that and show your support as well. Now, one thing I do, over to my far right side is Mike Stine, speaking of showing some support. Now, Mike, we just had the Tokyo Olympics over in 2020. We had the Olympics over there, and they actually created a Olympic park for the equestrian side of the Olympics. Now, this place was built in 1940 for the 1940 Olympic Games over in Tokyo, but it was canceled during World War II. Now, you've seen places where they build this huge infrastructure for Olympics, and then the Olympics leave, and they've got like these dead towns and these ghost towns because they have no use for these facilities anymore. Well, Tokyo right now, the Japan Racing Association has taken this arena that was built in the 1940s. They've adapted, of course, to make it more suitable for the 2020 Olympics, but they also had the 2020 Paralympics out there as well. And they're actually, once everyone's gone, they're changing it and they're opening it up to the whole entire, for everyone to enjoy this place. So it's going to still be a functioning arena. And I think I was looking at it, seats like, I don't know, 90,000, 100,000 people. It's a huge arena. And they're also going to make it more accessible for people with disabilities, which is something that the Japanese culture, they kind of look at disability like as a downfall to someone. So just to let you know, I saw this article. I thought it was interesting that they're opening it up, and that's the Japanese Racing Association has. They're going to keep that facility over there that you saw in the 2020 Olympics, and they're actually turning it into a nice little park. They're going to have vending out there, and it's going to be a main attraction in Tokyo. And I think that's a great thing to do, especially for the horse community, because it's hard to find big lands and big areas like that, and to keep the upgrade and stuff. And Japan is taking the initiative to do that as well. Now, we were talking about high-low horses and the biomechanics of horses. Now, one thing Mike wanted to get into here, what is white line?
White line, that is a fungus problem that attacks into the wall of the hoof. It does not actually attack the area they call the white line, which is where the white line grows out, is where the sensitive lamina and the hoof horn lamina connect together, and it comes out the bottom, and it's kind of a yellowish ring around the inside of the hoof. Mm-hmm. And it's the inner part of your hoof wall. There is a middle part of the hoof wall, and there's an exterior part of the hoof wall that is a harder structure. So it kind of goes more for the middle part of the hoof wall. So it goes up between the lamina and the hardened outer shell. If you have a hoof that has been stressed, if you've got balance problems, the better balanced the foot is, the less problems you're going to have with it. On horses that I do on a regular basis, you may have a little tiny spot, but normally little to nothing. And I always keep a few treatments in my toolbox.
And what do you use to treat that?
Well, there are Lord knows how many things out there now. When it first started getting to be a problem in this part of the country, and it depends on where you live, because if you live up, let's just say Montana, you probably don't know what it is, because it loves a moist, warm environment. You know, we have more funguses here than they would in the Midwest.
Right.
And, I've worked a little bit in the Midwest, and it's a very different hoof than what you've got in the Southeast. And different parts of the country, the hoof responds differently. But there are a number of different fungus bacterias, whatever is going up in there. Bernie Chapman, who has passed away down in Texas, did a big study on white line some years back. And as it eats away, it changes the texture of the inner wall. As Bernie would say, it's people who knew Bernie, he'd call it Parmesan, the consistency of Parmesan cheese.
Gross.
And
I mean, that explains it. I mean,
Well,
that's, I mean, when you say that, you're like, you know exactly what you're talking about.
I think a lot of the world says Parmesan cheese, but Bernie said, for Bernie, it was Parmesan cheese.
I knew exactly what I was
But,
talking about.
You know, if you get a little crack, it will start up behind the crack. It will tunnel out. And, you know, I check for it when I'm doing horses. I've got a little probe that I'll go in there, and if I need to, I'll clean out the tunnel, and I will pack it with something medicated to kill it. When this first started, people were, one of the things I remember, and I hadn't heard this in a long time, was soak them in vinegar and copper sulfate. But since then, there's been a lot of products come out on the market. There are some products that you soak in. There are products you apply directly. They've come up with copper nails, copper shoes. I've got copper shoes, a pair of copper shoes I bought for someone in my shop building, and I told them what the price of them was going to be, and they said, well, we don't want to do that. But
is copper softer than the regular steel shoes that are on there? I'd imagine so.
well, it's an alloy.
Okay.
You can't heat it as much as you can a steel shoe, but it is an alloy, and it is durable. But it's a little on the pricey side.
Give me an idea of what a price is, just so our listeners are thinking, well, you know, I want to get a tin roof for my house, and you find out at, you know, $18 a square foot, and you're like, nah, I'll stick with the shingles. What's the price of a copper shoe?
Well, the copper shoes that I bought for this person, I think the price tag on that set of 4 shoes was around $100
For 4 shoes.
for 4 shoes. Yeah.
And that's comparable to what is 4 shoes for a regular horse that you buy or whatever.
Well, there's
not to give away your trade secrets or anything, but
there is a considerable difference in price on materials.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you've got the same kind of labor in it. So guess what? Your price needs to go up to match that, or you're kind of going in the hole for doing it.
right.
It's like they have some copper nails that they've come up with that are an alloy, or they are plated. And you can plate your regular nails. There are people that used to do that. A lot of people got away from it. I did it at one time, and I was like, oh boy, this is aggravating. But, you know, like I say, I keep something in my box. If there's an area, I've got a little pick that is made out of a cheap screwdriver. I used to use bone curettes, but they're not that easy to find, and they break after a while. But, you know, if I've got an area, you take, you know, I check it. I probe in it. I scrape it out. If there's any kind of a void in there, I reach into my box, and I've got a paste in there that I put in the little void, and you get some of the copper on the horseshoe when it comes off, because most of what I've been using does have some copper in it. Now, some people do not like copper sulfate. It got to where there was a time where, ooh, we don't want to use copper sulfate because it's harsh. But a lot of the products do have copper sulfate in it. And it is effective. I certainly wouldn't put it on crackers and eat it.
I was going to say, is there anything that you can change in the horse's diet to prevent white lines? Is it something like a supplement or anything? Like, I know the big thing is having collagen, the powdered collagen for your hair and nails for us humans, and, you know, makes your nails grow. It's like the prenatal pills that you get. It makes your hair grow, makes your nails grow. Is there anything that you can do and makes your nails stronger? Is there anything that the horse could eat to prevent white line, to keep the hooves stronger?
There may be. I don't have any good answer.
So there's not like a cure-all. Like, as long as you feed your horse these 3 tablets every day, you should not have white line in an area that white line is prone to.
If there is, there again, I've missed that one altogether. I'd love to know what it is. But, you know, it's like donkeys and mules tend to have more problems with it than a horse does. I've got one client that has donkeys that I don't know what the deal is there, because they spend more time paying attention to this and taking care of this and treating them themselves than anybody I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody come near what they're doing. Their property is fairly low. It's damp. I think they've got to have the fungus in the ground, because it never, ever quite goes away.
So that might be an agricultural thing where that you would have to treat the ground with maybe copper sulfide or something to keep it from resonating into the hoof.
Well, I don't know what you would do with that. I have no idea. I've had people say, well, if you lime your place good, that will get rid of it, but I don't know. But I mean, that's like vinegar and you know, people have treated with baking soda, and you know, just changing the pH in the foot can help.
Okay.
And changing the pH with some of these things that are growing in there, they can't grow in certain environments. And you know,
well, they make alkaline water for humans to change the pH in our body. You would think maybe they could change the pH in just the normal drinking water in a horse to prevent it.
Right. And you know, I've had some of these questions. When I treat it, I'm there, I treat it one time, I'm gone. I see the horse when I'm back to work on it. So, you know, I'm going to go with something a little more aggressive.
Right.
I have been addressed in a barn before. So what do you mix with lemon juice to treat fungus? And I'm like, I don't know. I use lemon juice in my tea.
Right.
But apparently you can. And I know tea tree oil has been used. There've been so many different things thrown out there. I know you can go out on the internet and find anything everybody's dreamed up to treat it with. But, you know, it is something we need to pay attention to. The farriers should be paying attention to. When you're shoeing a horse, if you're flying through them and you're not looking, it can become a problem. If you pay attention to it, and if nothing else, take a good stiff wire brush to the foot if you feel like a spot where you need to, and see what comes out of there when it's a minimal place, and treat it. I don't really have any problems with it. It's existing damage to a foot, or, you know, the horses that end up with the vet clinic with major damage. I've had feet that had so much damage that you had rotation like you would with a laminitic horse. But, you know, it was half the foot was eaten up with it, and I don't know what was done before I was there, but a lot of times a foot like that, you look at it, it's like, there wasn't much maintenance to that foot for a long time.
So I was going to say, what happens if you let the white line go? Does it actually lose its hoof altogether to where you can't actually physically put a shoe on it? What's the actual end result if you just let it go unknowingly or knowingly? Just, you know, I can't afford it. Unfortunately, you know, if you have a horse, you should be able to afford all the maintenance on it. But if you just let it go, hey, and the white line gets really, really bad, what's the worst case scenario that would happen to that horse?
Well, the worst case scenario is, well, like the one that we had rotation and all that sort of deal, because the foot became so unstable. Normally, that's the rare case. But it's kind of like, I guess, like fingernail fungus going up under your fingernail.
Gross.
Right. It is akin to that. And I guess if that goes far enough, your fingernail will probably fall off. I haven't had problems with that, but being a farrier, I've smacked my thumbnail plenty of times with a hammer and lost it a bunch of times. Problem is, you know, if your horse's hoof just kind of sloughs off, it's really, really hard for them to be a horse without a hoof.
Well, there you go. It's like walking on knuckles.
Basically, yeah, that's about it.
All right, I've got an email question that came in from last week's show. This is from Alta Bunny Bridgerton, 63 from Boston, Mass. She says, this is my very first horse. Well, congratulations there, Alta. Very first horse, and it has shoes. What's the best way to clean a shoed horse's foot? And that's from Mrs. Bridgerton, in 63 from Boston, Massachusetts. What's the best way to clean a shoed horse?
Well, we all have hoof picks. Okay.
I mean,
to what degree of cleaning a hoof?
I guess she's worried about, because she's never had a horse before, according to her letter here. I guess she's worried about knocking the shoe off for the most part. You know, picking the horse's foot.
If you're worried about knocking the shoe off, picking the foot, that shoe's coming off anyway. So I wouldn't worry about that. And, you know, I've had people that are worried about going in there and hurting the horse's foot with a hoof pick. If you got a healthy hoof, you're not going to hurt it. And, you know, if you've got places where you've got deep fungus, if you're going in there, yes, it can get sore. But the other end is you need to treat those areas. You know, it's like you'll get a little split down the middle of the frog that gets really deep sometimes. I clean those out, but I've got a tool that I like to use that. You can take a roll of gauze and use it like dental floss in there if you got a deep one. You need to treat that, because that is a place for fungus, and you know, it is something that needs to be taken care of. If you don't, it just gets worse.
Well, good. Well, hopefully, Alta, that answered your question. Mike, anything else before we wrap up today's show?
I hadn't got anything. You got anything, Travis?
I don't, but I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to us, downloading us, subscribing to us as well. Make sure you subscribe to Equine Dynamics over on YouTube, and you can see every podcast we do. We have a matching video as well. Like I said, we'll have some tools and stuff here in the studio, so Mike will show you. Actually, maybe that's what we'll plan on next week. You'll bring some of your tools up here and describe what you're actually using on the horse's feet and stuff, so people can be more familiar when they see you lean over and grab that $300 hammer and the $2 screwdriver that you made. They know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Any questions, any photos and stuff for Mike Stine, make sure you go to equinedynamics.com. Email him in the subject line, just put podcast, just like Miss Bridgerton did, and we will answer it on the very next podcast as well. On behalf of Mike Stine.
Yes, have a good day. I think that screwdriver that I modified was about $1.49.
Okay. You got a discount. My name is Travis Holmes saying good night and good night. There you go.
Hi, Lucky. Good night, Dad. Night, Dusty.
40.
Good night, Dad. Good night, Dad.